Jason Chaffetz, the host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick. Tomi Lahren, former senior advisor to President Trump. Stephen Miller is with us. Tomi, I don't know what to make of this. The fact that the media mob now is put in a position they have no choice. They now have to report that which I was reporting before the 2020 election, which has gotten progressively and frankly dramatically worse. And that is Joe Biden being weak and frail and a cognitive mess. Now they have to cover it, and the Biden White House, they're furious that the truth is being told. I don't think it's going to work.
I don't know if it's that they have to cover it or now they've been given permission to cover it. I would believe that actually the Democrat Party has given the media a little bit of a pass and said, all right, we want this guy out, so now you can take the gloves off, you can take off the kitty gloves, and you can actually question this president. You can question his cognitive, physical, mental abilities. I think even when we're seeing Joe Biden walking with Nancy Pelosi, I would not be surprised if Nancy Pelosi didn't pull him aside and say, now is the time to step down gracefully or at least not run again. I think him being in California, to me, that says everything I need to know. I think Gavin Newsom is getting ready. I think the media is getting ready. We're heading into the spring. Wait till we head into the summer. Joe Biden might be white-knuckling this, holding on to his power because of his ego. But if the Democrat Party and those who really run it say it's time to go, Joe, it will be time to go, Joe.
You know, Jason, when Joe had to give up the big boy steps to get up Air Force One for the little baby steps, and Joe got his new sneakers, I guess they thought that was going to work. Now they have a Secret Service agent, I guess, ready to help him if, God forbid, he falls or stumbles yet again. But if he can't make it up the baby steps of Air Force One, and he already gave up the big boy steps on Air Force One, that's a pretty big problem.
That poor Secret Service agent, I feel for him because you know he's nervous that the president's going to come tumbling down on him. Look, I worry about that thick grass on the south lawn of the White House. I think Joe Biden with new sneakers, they're evidently thicker and bigger. He's going to go tumbling. And I think the big event is actually going to be on March 7th, the State of the Union. You know, he's used to a teleprompter. It's about the size of the Jumbotron there where the Dallas Cowboys, play their games. That thing is huge. He's going to have two little teleprompters, and he better give an hour's worth of speech, and I don't know that he can make it up those steps, even getting on the dais there in the House of Representatives. So any moment, everybody's watching. He's going for a fall. You just know it's going to happen.
Stephen Miller, maybe President Trump can find an extra pair of that sold-out sneaker line that he released over the weekend. I know it's sold out. I know they're selling for big prices on eBay. Maybe those sneakers would help. Maybe he needs to change the sneaker he's using again.
Sadly, Joe Biden's decline is so pronounced, not even a pair of Trump sneakers can save this man. It gets worse every week, every single day. The physical decline, the cognitive decline, the decline in appearance, in vibrancy, in dynamism. He's literally decaying before our eyes. And that is why the Democrat Party is in a state of panic. They are trapped. Joe Biden is unwilling to step aside. He spent his entire life dreaming of nothing else but being president since he was a little kid, his entire career, and he's not going to let this go. They're going to have to grab it out of his hands, and yet they know the American public has already made up its mind. Joe Biden is too frail. Joe Biden is too weak. Joe Biden is too confused. The idea that the most powerful nation in the world has a president that our friend and foe alike understand has senile dementia is a national security threat. And of all of the vulnerabilities the Democrats face heading into November, and it is a long list, inflation, war raging around the world, a wide open southern border, Joe Biden's radical mental incapacity has surely become one of the absolute top issues on the minds of all American voters.
You know, Tomi, let me go back to you. You mentioned the name Gavin Newsom. I had 2 interviews with him myself. He had his debate with Governor DeSantis right here on this program. I mean, he has been adamant that he is not going to run under any circumstances, and even went as far as to say that, in fact, there would be Vice President Harris that is up next, not him. And then he also then followed up with free health care for illegal immigrants in California, the sanctuary state. Not exactly a popular issue if you want to ever move to the center in a presidential election year.
No, but if you recall during the Democrat
right?
debates, well, I believe it's going to be Gavin. And if you recall during the Democrat debates, every Democrat raised their hand when they talked about giving health care to illegals and allowing basically illegal immigration. So I don't think that that's going to be as much of a problem as the fact that his state is going to have a huge budget shortfall. But it really doesn't matter because right now they have Joe Biden who can't get a sentence out. So Gavin Newsom, with his age and his charisma, is going to look a lot better to voters, especially low information voters, than Joe Biden ever would. Gavin Newsom is the saving grace. I know he said over and over again that he's not running, but if you ever known a Democrat to be straightforward, if he can use this and say that he's doing it for the good of the country and the good of the party, he will absolutely step into those shoes. They will get Kamala out of the way. Gavin Newsom is ambitious. He always has been. Watch Gavin Newsom. Put a tracker on Gavin Newsom like they do Taylor Swift's private jet. You'll see this man is already running a shadow campaign, and he will be the nominee. I still maintain that.
Listen, you may very well be right, Jason. I mean, he's been pretty adamant to me. I'm not sure what to make of it, but for him to even go as far as to say VP Harris would be up before him, and you would have to move the vice president out of the way, I don't think that's an easy task. An African-American woman being passed over for a liberal white male in California, especially considering the identity politics that drives the Democratic Party. How would that go over?
I think they put themselves in a box. They didn't say they were going to put up the most competent person. They said they were going to put up the person who looks a certain way. It is so fundamentally wrong who we are as Americans. And hey, if you're going to go all that way, why don't you put up Adam Schiff as your nominee? Maybe Eric Swalwell could be the vice president. Maybe they could get Fang to be their chief fundraiser. I mean, Democrats, just go all in. Be all California. Go for it.
You want Fang as VP? Wow, I thought I was good in the humor department tonight. I think you outdid me.
Chief fundraiser.
All right, so Stephen Miller, I've had many people, because I do 3 hours of radio. We do this TV show every night. Now people are beginning to tell me, Hannity, you've got to stop. Don't talk about it anymore. Don't point it out anymore, because they want him to be on the ticket. They think he's the easiest to beat. And I'm like, I have a job to do. I got to tell people the truth. Where do you see this going? Do you think that Joe Biden gets pushed out? Does he, quote, voluntarily move aside? Do you see that scenario unfolding?
Well, I think the way Joe Biden's mind works, I mean, to the extent that it works at all, of course, the more that people justly criticize his age, the more stubborn he gets, the more he digs in. Look at that angry press conference. The more that it's called out, the more that he insists against all evidence and all reason that he's still with it, that he doesn't have diminished faculty. So far from causing him to bow out, it causes him to entrench. I just want to pick up on the point that was made earlier about the Kamala Harris problem. They are completely trapped. There is no way around the fact that if they ditch Biden, they're stuck with a vice president who is historically unpopular and comically incompetent. And so they have no way, if they wanted to glide down to Gavin Newsom. So there really is no clean way for them out of this box that they have gotten themselves into. Of course, that is the reason why Joe Biden is so intent on staying in, because I'm sure even in his diminished state, he understands that they have no way around Vice President Harris. So for the time being, the Democrat Party is totally trapped.
Exit question predictions. We start with Tomi. I think I know your answer. You're in the Gavin Newsom camp. Who will be on the ticket for the Democrats come November?
I believe it's going to be Newsom, Trump, and to that Kamala Harris point, I'm not sure she entirely wants to be president. Her actions wouldn't indicate it. They can get her out of the way. Don't underestimate a Democrat. It's going to be Gavin.
Jason, who's it going to be?
I think Barack Obama makes this decision, and he goes to the person that he likes the most, and that's Susan Rice.
Wow. Interesting. Nobody else has brought that up before. Stephen Miller, you get the last word.
I'm going to be in the minority here. I'm going to say it's going to be Biden. He is not going to let it go, even as he decomposes in real time.
Oh, my gosh. Well, in a way, it's kind of happening. It's actually, it's chilling when you think about the national security implications and the current state of our country and the current state of the world. That's a chilling scenario. All right. Thank you all. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.